is Traversing the Strange World with Peace and Toodles.
All right, the episode that all two of us have been waiting for.
Welcome back, everybody.
I'm Toodles.
I'm Peace.
So what are we going to talk about today?
Today, we are going to be delving into the Gospel of Thomas.
One of many Gospels, one of the apocryphal
Yes, that
Gospels.
are not found in our canonical scriptures.
Do you know when it was found?
It was found in 1945 in the Nag Hammadi Library. The Nag Hammadi Library, that's the same place the Dead Sea Scrolls were discovered, which, if you're not aware of what the Dead Sea Scrolls were, it's very large portions of the Old Testament, some including Isaiah and Ezekiel.
Lots of prophetical work.
Mm-hmm. And they actually matched up with the translations that Jewish people currently had. And they were written down a long time ago, at least dating back to the 1st century.
It's interesting, too, that being found with the Dead Sea Scrolls, you would think that people would uphold them to the same validity of the Dead Sea Scrolls, which many pastors and churches use to reference to back up what they read in scriptures in our canonical Bible that we have now. But the Gospel of Thomas seems to have been pushed aside and is kind of ignored. It's quite interesting. And for obvious reasons that we'll get into because of some of the controversial things that are said in it. But it's interesting, that we've kind of cherry-picked what proof we want to look at for scriptures. It's common to say the Apocrypha is dangerous to read. It could hurt your faith. It could make you get introduced to doctrines that aren't the current one that we have in Jesus. But we also reference a lot of non-canonical books and writings to prove the scriptures at the same time. And so it's almost like we're riding the fence on it. Like, look at the writings of Josephus. Like, that's referenced all the time. Tobit is referred to many times. I've heard that referenced.
And we have to keep in mind also, whenever we're looking at any collection of literature throughout history, it's his story.
His story.
So many of the reasons that, the Gospel of Thomas is not included in our New Testament canon is you'll see that the authors of the Gospel of Thomas, they had views of Christ and really many things surrounding the Christian faith that was totally different than the view of the early church fathers. So here we go. The Gospel of Thomas was discovered in 1945 near Nag Hammadi, Egypt, a small town in the northern part of the country. Specifically, it was found in a limestone cave, hidden away in a collection of 13 leather-bound papyrus books stored in a vessel. This collection is known as the Nag Hammadi Library, which contains 52 Christian and Gnostic works, including the Gospel of Thomas. The Gospel of Thomas is considered a non-canonical text, meaning it's not part of the standard Christian Bible. Its discovery has shed light on the diversity of early Christian thoughts and practices. This text is written in Coptic, an Egyptian language that uses Greek alphabet characters. Prior to its discovery in 1945, we did have small fragments of the text that were simply titled Sayings of Jesus. Some of them lined up with different sayings we'll see in the Gospel of Luke, the Gospels of Mark, and the Gospels of Matthew in particular. Until the full Gospel of Thomas was discovered later and added greater context. But we did know of the Gospel of Thomas because a lot of early church fathers, they did make mention that there was a Gospel of Thomas, but they spoke of it as heretical. And this wasn't like to anybody reading the writings of the early church fathers at that time, like the book wasn't you couldn't find it. Like if you had read that in 1445, it was still a mystery as to what the Gospel of Thomas was. The early church fathers condemned the Gospel of Thomas, labeling it heretical and apocryphal. Here are some of the quotes. Cyril of Jerusalem warned against the Gospel of Thomas, stating, "Let no one read the Gospel according to Thomas, for he is not one of the 12 apostles, but one of the 3 wicked disciples of Mani." I have no clue who Mani is. Irenaeus criticized the Gospel of Thomas for its Gnostic content, which he saw as a corruption of the true faith. Eusebius listed the Gospel of Thomas among spurious writings that were not genuine and not ought be read in the church. And then Jerome rejected the Gospel of Thomas, saying it was not one of the 4 Gospels and contained fables and monstrous doctrines. And then there's the Galatian Decree. The Galatian Decree, a 6th century document explicitly condemning the Gospel of Thomas as apocryphal.
Do you want to break down some of these things, or should we reference some of the controversial sayings of Jesus in the book? Because a lot of it does seem pretty Gnostic in belief, and a lot of it is definitely not aligned with our New Testament now.
Certainly. I was going to get to that in my notes, because I do think it would be good to give the audience kind of an understanding of what we're going into, to give more context as we read it, because we are going to be, despite what the church fathers said we ought to do, we're going to be reading the whole Gospel of Thomas today.
Should we read the whole thing? Because some of it, I mean, there's a lot of sayings that they do line up perfectly with the other Gospels, but then there's additional things that, completely throw your normal understanding, if you're pretty familiar with our Gospels now and our New Testament now in our 66-book Bible, there's some things that are quite different.
I do think it would be good to read the entire text. Again, it is only 114 sayings. Meta AI said that it would take about 15 to 20 minutes.
I got the whole Gospel of Thomas right here.
All right. Let me read a few more of my notes to add a little bit more context, and then we'll go ahead with that.
Context of the opposition.
So sorry,
to Thomas.
Irenaeus and Eusebius. We will be reading the Gospel of Thomas.
What was that name you just said earlier? You don't know what it is? Well, we should explore that a little bit.
Mommy. M-A-M-I.
Oh, mommy.
I could totally be mispronouncing that as well.
I like mommy.
So
sounds good to me.
When we hear the early church fathers calling something heretical, we got to ask ourselves, why is it heretical? They're going off from the premise that Paul gave, which the early church fathers, the Council of Nicaea, the narrative that they voted on was very much in line with the teachings of Paul as opposed to the other apostles. Because in early Christianity, some branches of Christianity specifically followed James, like the Ebionites. There were a lot of Gnostic Christians that they put a greater emphasis on Paul than the other apostles. But we don't see this. The gospel in the Gospels, the epistles, the entire New Testament, it was designed by the church fathers to deliver a certain narrative about it all. But other people had a different narrative. Are we upholding a particular narrative? Personally, no, I am not. I'm simply giving context to some of the strange things people have thought throughout history.
Right. And I think both of our knowledge with the Bible, too, we can easily point out what things are different. For sure. And what things are going to be the same. As far as the things that do line up with our Bible now, I think we'll probably skip over those because that's beating a dead horse, So a lot of people have talked about.
There are a few with slight differences where there's like nuance to that difference.
This is true, but it seems to be the same nuance you'd find just between the 4 Gospels that we have now, too. It's so slightly different, it doesn't necessarily change the meaning, as far as it's a different way to word it, which to me isn't really worthy of going in depth about if we already have it, in our Bible now. Because the Bible's common. There's like Christianity is the biggest religion out there, and there's whole marketing campaigns just for Christians. It's a huge group, and anything about what is in our Bible now, like it's going to be vast amounts of resources on it already in pastors and people going in depth, people at seminary talking about things. We're going to focus more on what's different, I think.
Oh, for sure. No use, repeating the same old thing, because we're here to introduce you to strange ideas. So, Paul said this, "But I fear lest many, as the serpent beguiled Eve through his subtlety, so your minds should be corrupted from the simplicity that is in Christ. For if he that cometh preaches another Christ, whom we have not preached, or if ye receive another spirit which we have not received, or another gospel which ye have not accepted, ye might well bear with him."
Is that Galatians?
2 Corinthians.
He says a similar thing in Galatians too.
What's that?
I gotta look it up. I just listened to a sermon about this, actually.
Hope y'all are having a good day. Hope you're drinking plenty of water. Hope you're getting half your body weight in grams of protein in. Because in order to maintain that muscle, you got to keep doing that.
I am astonished that you're so quickly deserting the one who you called to live in the grace of Christ and are turning to a different gospel, which is really no gospel at all. Evidently, some people are throwing you into confusion and are trying to pervert the gospel of Christ. But even if we or an angel from heaven should preach a gospel other than the one we preach to you, let them be under God's curse. As we have already said, so now I say again, if anybody is preaching to you a gospel other than what you accepted, let them be under God's curse. That's Galatians 1, 6-9.
So we see that the Bible even kind of gives testimony that there was a diversity of gospels out there at the time. It was pretty diverse leading up to the Council of Nicaea. The narrative that the Orthodox view accepts is that it puts an emphasis on Jesus and his ministry of the coming kingdom, the passion. The Gospels, they're all the narrative leads up to
sacrifice,
the climax, which is the passion of the Christ, and then also the purpose behind that bringing salvation if you believe and accept that in faith. So the Gnostics, for example, many scholars consider the Gospel of Thomas a Gnostic gospel. Gnostics accepted a different narrative about Christ. Let me tell you a little bit about what a Gnostic Christian was. A Gnostic Christian is a complex and multifaceted spiritual movement that emerged in the 1st century AD. They put an emphasis on spiritual knowledge. Gnostics believe that salvation comes through secret spiritual knowledge, not just in faith or good works. So rather than it being a gospel that puts an emphasis on faith in Jesus and his sacrifice, it's the hidden knowledge that he came to reveal. Dualism. Gnostics saw that the world as a battleground between good and evil, spirit and matter, physical and spiritual. You'll see an emphasis on this in the Gospel of Thomas. The divine spark. Gnostics believe that humans have a divine spark within them which needs to be awakened and freed from the material world. So a very popular thought back at this time, it was inspired by Plato, which he believed that this world is simply a shadow of a world that's made of light, where everything is perfect. And this is a corrupted world. Our souls are made of light, and when we die, they will return to the light. This view actually had quite a bit of an influence on both 1st century Christian and Jewish thinkers. to where that's kind of how they accepted. They started to see the Garden of Eden. The Garden of Eden, the state of the world was like that. We were spiritual. And then when we ate the fruit from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, we got physical bodies that a divine spark is trapped in.
You know, it's interesting. I've heard studies before, too. I forget what university, but I read something about these researchers were watching the artificial fertilization of an egg, like injecting semen towards the egg. I don't know how they do it, but upon the moment when the sperm hits the egg, there'd be a little spark of light. Interesting. This divine spark, you know, kind of makes me think of that little study. And
in this Gnostic view, they believed that God, it wasn't kind of the theistic view where God's like an anthropomorphic being with, you know, a body, beard, wearing a white robe, he's sitting on a throne.
Who says God has a beard? Point this out to me.
That's a good point. I don't think we see that anywhere in the Bible. It does describe, you know, the arm of God sitting on his throne, but it does never say he has a beard, though he is often depicted with one.
There's even a heavenly council and all kinds of other goodies to pick out of the Bible, but there is no beard.
The Gnostics would have believed that all this like physical imagery, it's all metaphorical and representing something deeper that you had to have the hidden knowledge to understand.
So the Gnostics were anti-bearded God.
They were like against the idea that there was like anything, like they associated like physical bodies with matter. God is light. Therefore, they believe that the light, the spark that we all have in us is a little piece of God. That's going to be an important thing to remember when we get into the Gospel of Thomas here shortly. All right, where was I? Okay, the demiurge. We don't really see an emphasis on the demiurge in the Gospel of Thomas, but it was part of the Gnostic Christians' view. Gnostics often saw the God of the Old Testament as a lesser deity, known as the demiurge, who created a flawed and material world. So he created the flawed and material world where our divine sparks are trapped. We, in order to leave this material world and be freed from this physical body, we have to unlock the secret knowledge brought by the bearer of light.
The bearer of light being?
Jesus.
Or is it Lucifer?
Jesus, the Gnostics believed Jesus as a divine messenger, a bearer of light. Gnostics saw Jesus as a divine messenger who brought forth secret knowledge, gnosis, to humanity.
But doesn't Lucifer mean bearer of light? Where does he fit into this picture of Gnostics?
I believe he means like it means morning star. I don't know. I think they would believe that Satan and the demiurge are probably one and the same. I would like to do an episode where we do a deeper dive on the Gnostics.
The Gnostics think the Old Testament God is Satan?
Yeah.
Is that what you're saying?
Mm-hmm. Because like in Ephesians where Paul refers to Satan as the prince, the power of the air, the ruler of this world. The Gnostics believed that he was referring to the Old Testament God, who was the ruler of this world, but who was an evil, corrupt God.
Why was he evil and corrupt?
Because he created a world that is clearly flawed, and they believed a true, omnipotent, all-powerful God wouldn't create a world that's flawed. So he must have been doing this in opposition to the true God, the God of light.
But he made a world where we have the choice to follow him, and if we do, according to the Old Testament, that brings about a blessed and joyful life. We just have the free choice to choose him or not.
Certainly. I don't know what the Gnostic view was on like the patriarchs, Moses, David. Like, I'm not entirely sure what, because they were like, it's clear that they were getting orders and directions. I know Gnostics had a very like anti-Semitic view of the Jewish people. They were very anti-Semitic sect of Christianity.
Interesting.
Later on down the road, especially like the Marcionite Gnostics. All right. Let me pick up where I left off. Grammar Nazi. Mystical practices.
Hey.
Gnostics engaged in various mystical practices such as meditation, prayers, and rituals to attain spiritual knowledge. Okay, so meditation and prayer. Neither of those sound very mystical. I'm curious to know what the rituals were they partook in. Apocryphal texts. Gnostics often used apocryphal texts, such as the Gospel of Thomas, to guide their spiritual practices and understanding the divine. Obviously, like apocryphal, that's a word simply made by somebody who is choosing what the orthodox view is. Diversity and complexity. Gnostic Christianity was a diverse and complex movement with various subgroups and interpretations. Some notable subgroups include Gnostic Christians. Oh, actually, I didn't finish those notes, so we're not going to go into that. Some early Christian thinkers, such as Origen and Gregory of Nyssa, were influenced by... Okay. This is some notes that I took down about Plato's view of heaven, God, and whatnot. And I very much think that it was a strong influence on like early Christian thinking. Here are some notes. Early Christian thinkers such as Origen and Gregory of Nyssa were influenced by Plato's idea about the soul and its nature. The concept of the soul as spiritual and immaterial entity is still present in many Christian traditions today. That's not necessarily an idea we see in the Old Testament, though. It doesn't refer to like a soul. It refers more so to them going down to the grave, the world of the dead. Plato's idea about the afterlife and the resurrection of the soul also had an impact on Christian thought and doctrine. The concept of the light returning back to its source.
So, you want to get into reading some of these sayings of Jesus?
Certainly.
You want to take them all in order?
Yes.
Every one of them? All 114?
I'd like to.
All right. The Gospel of Thomas, translated by Thomas, but a different Thomas.
Is that so? Hey, are you going to read the Gospel of Thomas, the Gnostic one, or the Gospel by some guy named Thomas?
Both in one. These are the secret sayings which the living Jesus spoke and which Didymus Judas Thomas wrote down, which was Thomas's full name. Number 1. And
one thing I'd like to point out real quick.
Yes.
That is a very different introduction to gospel, any of the other gospels. Many start with talking about him as Messiah. I don't believe that even called him Jesus Christ. It called him the living Jesus.
Yes, and it also said these are the secret sayings which the living Jesus spoke. The other gospels say some of the same things.
This is the gospel.
But there's no reference to them being secret sayings. Mm-hmm. Our first controversial verse is the very first one. And he said, "Whoever finds the interpretation of these sayings will not experience death." Controversial on the surface, but underneath, I'm sure all of us Christians would say he's talking about faith and salvation. So, number 2, Jesus said, "Let him who seeks continue seeking until he finds. When he finds, he will become troubled. When he becomes troubled, he will be astonished, and he will rule over the all." Capitalized A, all. Mm-hmm. Number 3, Jesus said, "If those who lead you say to you, 'See, the kingdom is in the sky,' then the birds of the sky will precede you. If they say to you, 'It is in the sea,' then the fish will precede you. Rather, the kingdom is inside of you, and it is outside of you. When you come to know yourselves, then you will become known, and you will realize that it is you who are the sons of the living Father. But if you will not know yourselves, you dwell in poverty, and it is you who are that poverty."
So real quick, I would like to highlight that he's putting an emphasis on realizing who you are. and putting in context that it was probably a Gnostic gospel, given its emphasis on hidden knowledge.
And the self.
Yes. That knowing yourself, many scholars believe he's talking about knowing that divine spark that's within you. Not only within you, but laying at the inside, it would seem as though the core of everything. So it's about the other gospels. They put an emphasis on recognizing the divinity of Christ, but the Gnostic view seems to be putting an emphasis on recognizing your own divinity. Wouldn't you say so?
I agree. It also gets into the controversial side of the law of attraction, too, which is like a modern way to talk about your ability to transmute reality, to come to realize your inner being within yourself, to listen to your inner voice, and to manifest things around you.
Yeah.
It's the more mystical side of the law of attraction we all hear so much of these days.
I like that line where it says, when you know yourself, you will be astonished. Or can you repeat that again?
When he finds, he will become troubled. When he becomes troubled, he will be astonished, and he will rule over the all.
I feel like you could even just take that out of its context and what it's really talking about, and you could apply it to the idea of just investigating things, whether that be the world or yourself. When you look into things and you discover like the pattern lying beneath it.
It doesn't say what you're seeking. It just says he who seeks. Let him who seeks continue seeking until he finds. Find what? Doesn't say. But when he finds, he will become troubled. When he becomes troubled, he will be astonished, and he will rule over the all.
I like that. Very beautiful imagery.
Number 4. Jesus said, the man in old days will not hesitate to ask a small child 7 days old about the place of life, and he will live. For many who are first will become last, and they will become one and the same.
They will become one and the same. That is another thing you will see there be an emphasis on in this gospel. Oneness.
This could be compared to whoever receives the kingdom of God like a child, as Jesus says in the other scriptures.
That one putting an emphasis on faith.
Yes,
Childlike faith.
exactly. So, to say it modernly, an old man will ask a young child about the place of life, and he will live. Let's go on to number 5. Jesus said, recognize what is in your sight, and that which is hidden from you will become plain to you, for there is nothing hidden which will not become manifest. Now, it doesn't say when things will become manifest. The Bible says that someday everything that was done in secret will be brought to light, and it always points to the time of judgment when you die and you stand before the judgment seat of Christ to have your life examined, ultimately to see if you accepted him or not as your Savior, and then all of the past things that you did that are bad, the sins, they'll be forgiven. And if you didn't trust in Jesus for your salvation, all those things will be brought to light, you'll be ashamed and sent to hell. Number 6. His disciples questioned him and said to him, do you want us to fast? How shall we pray? Shall we give alms? What diet shall we observe? Jesus said, do not tell lies, and do not do what you hate, for all things are plain in the sight of heaven. For nothing hidden will not become manifest, and nothing covered will remain without being uncovered. So saying at the end there the same thing as the previous verse, but when they ask him about fasting, praying, giving alms, and what shall we observe, Jesus didn't directly
say no.
He just said, do not tell lies and do not do what you hate. Which reminds me of Paul saying, oh, the wretched man I am.
That which I will to do, I do not do. And that which I will not to do, I do.
Exactly. So this seems to fall in line with some of Paul's teaching, I guess, in this one little verse 6 here, of if you have a faith in Christ, then you know the good and the bad that you should do and should not do. But there's a spiritual battle inside you to where you do sin and you do the things that you know you're not supposed to do. You do what you hate. It seems here that Jesus is speaking.
Could you read the verse, please?
The second part, do not tell lies and do not do what you hate, for all things are plain in the sight of heaven. And then
It also reminds me of, there was a question, synoptic gospels, which are the 4 gospels in the canon, where the Pharisees asked Jesus, should we clean the outside of the cup or the inside of the cup? And Jesus says it's not what goes into a man that defiles him, but that which comes out of a man that defiles him.
out of his mouth, let's be specific. No need for confusion.
Yeah. Well, it can really defile something.
Yeah, I've seen the aftermath of some truck stops, that's for sure. Number 7. Jesus, hey, I'm writing a book about poop. Remember I told you about it?
Great things to come.
I can't talk about it. Jesus said, blessed is the lion which becomes man when consumed by man, and cursed is the man whom the lion consumes, and the lion becomes man.
This is the one verse where I had absolutely no clue as to what it was about. Like,
you and me are in the same boat.
There are other ones where, like, applying understanding of, like, Gnostic beliefs, you could kind of, he might be talking about this, but this one I'm like, I don't know, man.
So a man will eat a lion, and the lion will become a man, or the lion consumes a man, and the lion becomes man. Okay, so either way, the lion becomes man. Blessed is the lion which becomes man when consumed by man, and cursed is the man whom the lion consumes.
I thought maybe he was talking about reincarnation. Like, it's better to reincarnate to a higher being than a lesser being. And maybe the lion represents, like, our bestial nature. When we succumb to that.
So we have, either way, a lion is becoming a man.
And that's a bad thing.
The lion is blessed if the man consumes it. And the man is cursed if the lion consumes the man. But either way, the lion becomes a man.
If our salvation was dependent on understanding these things...
Don't say that.
I think we would be going to hell right now.
If this is actually about reincarnation, like you're saying, I guess it makes sense. Because if a lion's killed by a man and it reincarnates to a higher being, it's blessed. Blessed is the lion. But if a man is killed by a lion, then it says cursed is the man. But it doesn't say that man becomes a lion.
Right. And, like, reincarnation, you don't really see a lot of that idea being discussed in the New Testament, but it was an existent thought in the world of, like, Jewish people and the Greeks, antiquity. It was an idea that existed at that time. Some sects of Pharisees believed in reincarnation. There's a little bit of a hint in one of the Gospels that perhaps that idea even existed amongst the disciples. They're asking Jesus about John the Baptist, and they're saying, many people believe he's Elijah. And Jesus actually says he was Elijah. Well, Elijah went to heaven in a fiery chariot. John the Baptist, we have a description of his birth in Luke, prior to the birth of Jesus. So, what's up with that? Personally, I think that might be, I'm not saying reincarnate. I'm agnostic about this. But I do think that's evidence that reincarnation was something that existed in the minds of first century Jews.
Number 8. And he said, the man is like a wise fisherman who cast his net into the sea and drew it up from the sea full of small fish. Among them, the wise fisherman found a fine large fish. He threw all the small fish back into the sea and chose the large fish without difficulty. Whoever has ears to hear, let him hear. And there we see that saying that's in Revelation to the churches, he who has ears, let him hear. Jesus said that a couple times. So they throw their net in the sea, get a whole bunch of fish. They find a fine, large fish. And
They're
threw
like
all
focused
the
on that
small
one.
ones back.
Yeah. Kind of reminds me of where Jesus talks about a farmer buying a field that he knows a pearl is in, and he buys the field specifically for that pearl.
Yeah, it made me think of the harvest. Where Jesus, where we all die, and if, we're separated by how our lives.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Like the parable of the goats.
The goats and the sheep line.
Yeah.
Number 9. Jesus said, "Now the sower went out, took a handful of seeds, and scattered them. Some fell on the road, the birds came and gathered them up. Others fell on the rock, did not take root in the soil, and did not produce ears. And others fell on thorns. They choked the seeds, and worms ate them. And others fell on the good soil, and it produced good fruit, for it bore 60 per measure and 120 per measure." And that is pretty much the same parable that we have in the New Testament.
It's the first parable I
of the
believe,
sowers.
that Jesus gives in the Gospel of Matthew.
10. Jesus said, "I have cast fire upon the world, and see, I am guarding it until it blazes." Ooh.
I thought that was a cool verse.
I think it's cool too, but I don't know what it means.
I think
It's the waiting end
hidden,
times,
the
maybe?
hidden knowledge, like new information in a certain sense, it does create like a type of fire. Sometimes it creates controversy, and controversy creates a division.
I was thinking about the apocalypse, how, except for some of the creatures, everything seems to be natural phenomenon that'll destroy the world, fire, brimstone, insects that are very weird. I have cast fire upon the world, and see, I'm guarding it until it blazes.
I don't think we'll see though that there isn't that's another difference between this and the synoptic gospels, is that they were the 4 gospels we have, they were very prophetic and apocalyptic. It was put out that Jesus was fulfilling prophecy of the Old Testament with his messiahship and his crucifixion. And he also spoke of a coming kingdom and a coming judgment. There seems to be almost in here an absence of the apocalypse. Even we'll see it later on, like he says, Jesus, stumbling over my own tongue. Jesus, later on we'll see Jesus says that the kingdom of heaven will not come, but it's here and you don't recognize it.
Kind of how it previously stated, it's inside you and outside you.
So it's more, this gospel is going to put a greater emphasis on, we got to keep in mind that it'll put a greater emphasis on knowledge and enlightenment as opposed to prophecy.
We got a good one here. 11. Jesus said, "This heaven will pass away, and the one above it will pass away. The dead are not alive, and the living will not die. In the days when you consumed what is dead, you made it what is alive. When you come to dwell in the light, what will you do? On the day when you were one, you became two. But when you become two, what will you do?"
What's it talking about here?
Frick, if I know.
So
2 heavens, above and below, they'll pass away. The dead are not alive, and the living will not die.
Mm-hmm.
So, what is the dead and the living? Who knows? Maybe it's the, physically dead and alive when the end of the world comes, when the heavens pass away. In the days when you consumed what is dead, you made it what is alive. That confuses me.
Maybe it was saying you're releasing it to heaven. You're releasing the spark back up to its source.
Maybe.
Because I think it's important to keep in mind the Gnostic view of the dual worlds. How there's a world up above. I was starting to say what I was saying.
So below.
As above, so below. And there was a Platonic thought that it existed from Plato, that in the beginning when man was first created, it wasn't man and woman. We were four-limbed or four-armed, four-legged beings. And God separated us.
Spiders.
Or Zeus, in that sense, separated us and made us male and female. So I think this might be a reference to kind of the influence that Platonic thinking had on the Gnostics.
You know, there's a sign in the Bohemian Grove that says, "Weaving spiders come not here."
That's interesting.
There's a little conspiracy nugget for you. What is that supposed to mean? What's a weaving spider? Why is there a whole plaque dedicated to it at this controversial place?
Those who tangled the web.
When you come to dwell in the light, what will you do? On the day when you were one, you became two. But when you become two, what will you do? I feel like I'm reading a poem.
So, like, it seems that there's an emphasis on, again, there's an emphasis on oneness in this book. And the one thing that it does speak of in the future is the above and the below, the heavenly and the physical coming back to its natural state, which is one.
It's posed as a question.
Mm-hmm.
What will you do when you become two? What are we becoming one and two with? Exactly. When you come to dwell in the light, what will you do?
So
this leaves a lot of mystery in my head.
I believe with the Gnostics, there was this idea. I was trying to gather more information on it. I wasn't able to find much information. But again, as above, so below. I believe they believed that we had a heavenly doppelganger, basically. Like, think of multi-dimensions.
Is Dark Link from The Legend of Zelda.
Think of multiple dimensions, but there's like a heaven above and the earth below. And there was a perfect heavenly doppelganger, that where the spark of light that you had was connection to that heavenly doppelganger. But we are the flawed doppelganger, the corrupted flesh. And it speaks of, with the Gnostics, they had this view that everything one day will become one. And so that might be what he's talking about here. I might be totally misunderstanding this and botching it, though.
I think everything will become one when there's no more earth. The physical realm passes away. What's left? The spiritual realm, where everything perhaps is connected.
Well, even the New Testament, in a certain sense, does support the idea, but much differently, where it talks about every knee will bow and every tongue will confess. And Christ will reach this point where everything, all creation, is in submission to him.
Next, we have a controversial verse, number 12. The disciples said to Jesus, "We know that you will depart from us. Who is to be our leader?" Jesus said to them, "Wherever you are to go to James the righteous, for whose sake heaven and earth came into being."
Wow.
Heaven and earth came into being for the sake of this James the righteous. Mm-hmm. Who is this James the righteous, you may ask?
The brother of Jesus, the author of the Epistle of James.
We think the brother of Jesus. Is he actually?
Mm-hmm. James the Just, that was his name recognized by the early church.
According to who? Is that in the normal Bible?
No, so in this passage in the normal Bible, it's Peter. It's Peter. Peter is the rock. He says, "On this rock I will build my church."
Mm-hmm.
He is spoken of as the greatest disciple. So,
do we know that this is the James of our New Testament?
It's talking about him for sure.
Why, for his sake, has heaven and earth came into being exactly?
I'm not sure. I have heard that said in other sources. I can't remember which ones they were, but that was like something that other Christian sources did say, which is like almost giving him like a level of messiahship. Wouldn't it seem?
It does seem to be so. It's a mystery to me. Next up is our favorite one, next to the very last one. 13. Jesus said to his disciples, "Compare me to someone and tell me who I am like." Simon Peter said to him, "You are like a righteous angel." Matthew said to him, "You are like a wise philosopher." Thomas said to him, "Master, my mouth is wholly incapable of saying whom you are like." Jesus said, "I am not your master. Because you have drunk, you have become intoxicated from the bubbling spring which I have measured out." And he took him and withdrew him and told him these things. When Thomas returned to his companions, they asked him, "What did Jesus say to you?" Thomas said to them, "If I tell you one of the things which he told me, you will pick up stones and throw them at me. A fire will come out of the stones and burn you up." In the
audiobook you were listening to.
The audiobook of the Gospel of Tiggity Thomas I was listening to, it says what Jesus said to him, which was some foreign words that it said translated means "I am who I am," which we do read in our canonical Bible now. But here it says, if I tell you what he told me, you will pick up stones and throw them at me. A fire will come out of the stones and burn you up. Now, I read a commentary on this that said this was a parable of sorts, where the stones represent people opposed to the gospel of Christ, and the fire is the words of the Bible, meaning that the people who are opposed to what someone has to say about Jesus will attack you, and the words of the Bible will burn everyone up.
That's an interesting take on it.
Yeah, I don't know if I agree with that, but that's the only thing I could find about this verse.
So, one thing I forgot to leave out about the context of this book. The Thomas that it was written by was Didymus Judas Thomas. Didymus being Greek for twin, and Judas, it's connected to the name James or Judah. Thomas was Aramaic for twin. There was this belief by some people in the early church that because of this, and also in the canonical Gospels, it does refer to Thomas as the twin. It was a belief in some parts of the early church that Thomas was Jesus' twin brother, because it's believed that the author of the Epistle Jude, short for Judas, was this Thomas, because the author of the Epistle of Jude refers to himself as the brother of Christ. Now, if this is the twin of Christ, that creates some complications with the idea of the virgin birth.
Does it?
Yes, absolutely.
What if she, in her state of virginity, gave birth to twins?
It says that, well, they would both be sons of God then.
So?
And it can't be that Joseph was the father of one of them, because it says he did not know her until after the birth.
Meaning, a.k.a. they didn't have sex.
They didn't have sex. He didn't know her physically. But, as we've mentioned in previous episodes, some early sects of Christianity did not believe in a virgin birth. There are some gospels, in particularly the gospel of the Ebionites, which were a sect of Christians that was much more Jewish in its flavor. They did not have a virgin birth at the beginning of the Gospel of Matthew. In the Gospel of the Ebionites, it begins in Matthew chapter 3 at Jesus' baptism. And they believed after he rose from the water, and we hear a voice from heaven that says, "This is my beloved Son, today I have begotten you." They believed that that was the beginning of Jesus' messiahship and him being the Son of God. They believe that he was chose to be the Messiah based on his righteousness and not being divinely created Son of God.
Do you think possibly he was divinely inspired when it says when he was 12 years old, he was teaching in the temples and impressing the people he was teaching? When he was talking to the religious leaders?
So that wouldn't have been in the Gospel of the Ebionites. Because the Gospel of the Ebionites begins at his baptism. Which, by the way, speaking of Jesus in his younger life, there's also a Gospel of Thomas that is the infancy Gospel of Thomas. Which,
Get out of here. Really?
yeah, stories of him when he was a kid.
Where do you find that?
Same place you find the Gospel of Thomas.
Well, I guess we got a future episode in store.
Yeah, that would be a really cool one. Be a fun one.
There's a lot of teachings about Jesus having gone to Turkey and Greece to learn a lot of religion during his younger years.
There is also like the Orthodox understanding of where the various I cannot talk today. The various apostles went and for their ministry, and it's said that this Thomas went to India.
Who says he went to India? How do you know it's India?
It's part of church history. It's something that the Catholic Church definitely recognizes, and I believe something that early church fathers attest to. However, it could be more tradition than actual fact. But it's part of the tradition that talks about like how each of the apostles were martyred. One of them being boiled alive, Peter being hung on an upside down cross. It's all part of that tradition.
Maybe this brother of Jesus is a representation of that doppelganger you were talking about.
I'm glad you brought that up. So that's actually an idea that a New Testament scholar brought up, who I was listening to earlier this week.
Maybe Jesus is the divine light-bringing one. Right.
That was a thought that he was because he knows that thought existed amongst Gnostics. And so he said, some scholars say they believe the three things that Jesus told Thomas when he brought him off to the side is, I am you.
That would not directly oppose if it was actually I am who I am, because Thomas would know what that meant. And that's why he wouldn't have wanted to say it to the others. Because he wouldn't want it to be known that he's like the evil brother.
In a certain sense, it wouldn't contradict, though, with what Jesus was saying, because I feel like his main message in here is recognizing your inner divinity, recognizing the light within and its presence all over. And that brings a sense of oneness, meaning that we all end up becoming one because we all have God within us, and we are all are one. So I don't know, giving that sense, I don't know why it would have been so heretical for him to say that to the apostles. I don't know. It's a mystery.
14.
Got 100 more.
This might be a 2-part. It might even be a 3-part.
What are we at in time right now?
57 minutes.
Oh, boy.
Yes, sir. All right. Jesus said to them, this is 14. Jesus said to them, if you fast, you will give rise to sin for yourselves. And if you pray, you will be condemned. And if you give alms, you will do harm to your spirits. When you go into any land and walk about in the districts, if they receive you, eat what they set before you, and heal the sick among them. For what goes into your mouth will not defile you, but that which issues from your mouth. It is that which defile you. So there's some contradictory statements.
Mm-hmm. What if they gave them pork or shrimp? Lobster?
Well, then I guess we go to Paul about the freedom in Christ. If you fast, you will give rise to sin for yourselves. If you pray, you will be condemned. And if you give alms, you will do harm to your spirits. WTF.
It almost seems like it's actually condemning the traditional Christian view because those are things Jesus put a big emphasis on. He said to pray. He just said not to do your praying in public as like this big show.
They receive their gifts from being heard by man, and that is it. I don't know how to interpret this. Any Christians listening to this are probably like enraged at these statements.
Again, folks, we're not saying any particular view is true.
We're just talking about a book that we can read.
Context, yeah.
I'm trying to interpret maybe like a explainable meaning out of these things. If you pray, you'll be condemned. If you give alms, you'll do harm to your spirits. I wonder if it's talking about over-religious, like the Pharisees, but it doesn't seem like it. That's the only thing I can think of.
I think like it helps to not think like a Christian when you're reading this book, because one question I heard a scholar bring up in discussion of this is this a Christian letter?
What does praying mean? Is it just praying to God or praying to any being in general? Sending thoughts up to the universe?
Well, think about...
Is it like meditation?
Think about the question, though. What defines somebody as a Christian?
Just belief in Christ. Faith in Christ.
Faith in Christ, but his crucifixion, his resurrection, which this gospel does not mention or put an emphasis on at all.
Correct.
So it's like, I believe in Jesus as a wise teacher, an archetypal symbol of the ideal man. Does that make me a Christian? Because it's a view of Christ, which gathers inspiration and has similarities to those of Christ in the gospel, but is not in alignment with what they teach about Jesus in the gospel. So what do you say about that?
It makes me think about this alternate teaching that one of the apostles was actually crucified on the cross. Even though there's no mention of that in here, or one of the disciples, I mean.
Where's that? Do you know where that originates from?
I've heard that multiple times. I can't think of where I read it, though, or heard it, whatever it was. It might have been on one of those unreliable conspiracy theorist podcasts or something. I don't know. They were saying that maybe Jesus wasn't actually crucified, but it was somebody in his place. If I remember, dude, I really want to say it was Judas.
In the Gospel of Judas, that's a Gnostic gospel, and basically Jesus takes Judas and shows him his crucifixion and shows him, look, his celestial form up above the cross, and he's like, I'm not really suffering here. This is all, basically, Jesus says in that gospel, this is all a show put on to, lead people to believe a certain thing, but I'm showing you, Judas, the true layer of what's going on here, the underlayer of the onion.
So the crucifixion would be for what advantage? Just to get people to follow Jesus?
I'm not entirely sure, because the Gnostics didn't put an emphasis on that. But it was clearly something that did happen to Christ historically. So I think they had to come up with their own idea of why that happened, which we'll see in other Gnostic Gospels that we'll cover on future episodes.
Man, I'm going to be stuck on this one for a while. If you fast, you'll give rise to sin for yourself. If you pray, you'll be condemned. And if you give alms, you'll do harm to your spirits. All right, let's move on. 15. Jesus said, when you see one who is not born of woman, prostrate yourselves on your faces and worship him. That one is your father. Pretty straightforward. 16. Jesus said, men think, perhaps, that it is peace which I have come to cast upon the world. They do not know that it is dissension which I have come to cast upon the earth, fire, sword, and war. For there will be 5 in one house, 3 will be against 2, and 2 against 3, the father against the son, and the son against the father, and they will stand solitary.
Similar passage in Luke.
Yep. I think we can move on from that one, because this all pretty much lines up. I haven't come to bring peace, but a sword. 17. Jesus said, I shall give you what no eye has seen, and what no ear has heard, and what no hand has touched, and what has never occurred to the human mind. Cue the alien music. It's mystery. Mysterious. 18. The disciples said to Jesus, "Tell us how our end will be." Jesus said, "Have you discovered then the beginning that you look for the end? For where the beginning is, there will be the end. Blessed is he who will take place in the beginning, for he will know the end and will not experience death."
I think that is a reference to that place of light that the Gnostics believed in. That
This divine light that comes into being in your body when you're conceived is where your end will be also. It's the same spark of light that it ends with.
it's going back to the sort of the beginning, the place where we came from. Our beginning is in our end.
That's how I read that too.
Yeah.
19. This is one that I was talking to you earlier about that was interesting to me. Jesus said, "Blessed is he who came into being before he came into being. If you become my disciples and listen to my words, these stones will minister to you. For there are 5 trees for you in paradise, which remain undisturbed summer and winter, and whose leaves do not fall. Whoever becomes acquainted with them will not experience death."
Acquainted with the trees.
With the trees. What are these trees? There's 5 of them that remain undisturbed summer and winter.
It has to be a reference to something like, reread the beginning of the verse.
Jesus said, "Blessed is he who came into being before he came into being. If you become my disciples and listen to my words, these stones will minister to you. For there are 5 trees," on and on.
I think he might be talking about having a realization of your heavenly self, your heavenly origin, coming from the place of light. I know I keep repeating that thought process, but from what I've gathered, this was a huge, this was basically the message of what the message of the cross was to normal Christians, to Gnostics.
You know what's interesting?
The realization of your true nature is that's salvation. That's the hidden knowledge.
One of my friends said that he found a podcast where there was this story of this person who could see souls. And she said that not every human has a soul. Some are just, going back to the
Non-playable characters.
simulation theory. Yeah, the NPCs is people without souls.
Sometimes I think, if we are in a simulation, I feel like there are some people that you run into where it's like, dude, you're an NPC. They just
Yeah, I agree.
They're talking about the weather. They're just it's like, are you real, man? Don't feel engaged.
That's where I kind of go when blessed is he who came into being before he came into being. Mm-hmm. Meaning there was a soul that existed before it was put into the body to come into being as a physical human.
And that there's some people who don't have that place.
Right. So they did not come into being before coming into being. Meaning they didn't come into being as a soul spiritually before they came into being physically as a human. Therefore, they're not blessed because the end for them is nothing. Just into the blackness, I guess.
And the simulation theory is kind of a good way to describe that in modern thinking terms. Basically, that's a person where they didn't start out in the world outside of this simulation. They didn't start out in the world outside of this simulation. They're part of the game, basically. I think I'm ready to move to that next verse, though, if you are.
The stones will minister to you, though. If you become my disciples and listen to my words, these stones will minister to you. And then there's these mysterious trees. I've never heard anything about trees like this before.
The
5 trees in paradise.
I believe there's trees in paradise in the...
How do you become acquainted with...
Revelation? Do you mind handing me your Bible? When it talks about the new heavens and the new earth.
I don't remember this.
It's at the end of Revelation, I believe.
The New King James Version. That Bible was given to me by this girl that we kind of wanted to date, but her dad wouldn't let us. And then I moved away, and she got married to somebody else. It's kind of comical. It's got my name on it. It's kind of cool. Leather bound. A little Bible.
In the middle, and he showed me a pure river water of life, clear as crystal, proceeding from the throne of God and of the Lamb. In the middle of the street, on either side of the river, was a tree of life, which bore 12 fruits, each tree yielding its fruit every month. The leaves of the trees were for healing of the nations. That is the verse I was thinking of. It says...
Is that it? Or is there more about these trees?
In the middle of its street, on either side of the river, was the tree of life. So it's like mentioning multiple trees of life. And it did mention about its leaves never withering. Can you go back?
It did?
Yeah.
In Revelation?
Yeah.
Read that into that mic right there.
And he showed me a pure river of water of life, clear as crystal, proceeding from the throne of God and of the Lamb. In the middle of its street, on either side of the river, was the tree of life, which bore 12 fruits, each yielding its fruit every month. The leaves of the trees were for healing of the nations. So, like, yielding its fruit every month. That
every
means
month, all
it's
year?
always in harvest, yeah.
Interesting. Okay. Yeah, let's move on. Number 20. The disciples said to Jesus, "Tell us what the kingdom of heaven is like." He said to them, "It is like a mustard seed. It is the smallest of all seeds, but when it falls on tilled soil, it produces a great plant and becomes a shelter for birds of the sky."
Pretty similar to the Synoptic Gospels.
Yes, sir. So, kingdom of heaven spreading. 21. Mary said to Jesus, "Whom are your disciples like?" He said, "They are like children who have settled in a field which is not theirs. When the owners of the field come, they will say, 'Let us have back our field.' They will undress in their presence in order to let them have back their field and to give it back to them. Therefore, I say, if the owner of a house knows when the thief is coming, he will begin his vigil before he comes and will not let him dig through into his house of his domain to carry away his goods. You then be on your guard against the world. Arm yourselves with great strength, lest the robbers come to find a way to come to you, for the difficulty which you expect will surely materialize. Oh, let there be among you a man of understanding. When the grain ripened, he came quickly with his sickle in his hand and reaped it. Whoever has ears, let him hear." So here we have this reaping that
I think
he's
it's talking
about.
the treasure inside the house. I think it's talking about the soul. Because it also talks, says that, but prior to that, it talks about these little children taking off their clothes in the middle of the field, like just quickly and willingly, and dancing on the clothes. So it's like, it's talking about putting off the physical body material and protecting what's within.
So accept the kingdom of God like a little child, all right? You're a child in these meat suits that we have, our souls inside. When the owners of the field come, when God comes and says, "Let us have back our field," they will undress in their presence in order to let them have back the field and give it to them. So we will leave our bodies. The bodies will be harvested by, that's strange. Let us have the bodies, the field. So
It's putting off the material.
We are in a meat farm of extraterrestrials. They want the bodies back to recycle them and put new souls in them.
That's actually what the Gnostics believe for sure.
Is it really Gnostic?
What?
I just hear that on all the UFO
I was
stuff.
being funny, dog.
Therefore, if the owner of a house knows that the thief is coming, he switches to a house from the field. He'll begin his vigil before he comes and not let him dig through his house of his domain to carry away his goods. You then be on guard against the world. And basically be prepared.
And protect what's within.
For the difficulty which you expect will surely materialize. So don't focus on the negative. Maybe this is more manifestation things. Let there be among you a man of understanding. When the grain ripened, he came quickly with his sickle in his hand and reaped it. Let there be among you a man of understanding. He's going to be the one that reaps the field. Interesting. Who is this man of understanding? Is it human? Is it Jesus?
Could you repeat that again?
Let there be among you a man of understanding. When the grain ripened, he came quickly with his sickle in his hand and reaped it. Is it parable? I think that's parable.
Oh, yeah, that's certainly a parable.
Let's go to 22. Jesus saw infants being suckled. He said to his disciples, "These infants being suckled are like those who enter the kingdom." They said to him, "Shall we then, as children, enter the kingdom?" Jesus said to them, "When you make the two one, and you make the inside like the outside, and the outside like the inside, and the above like the below, and when you make the male and the female one and the same, so that the male not be male, nor the female, and when you fashion eyes in the place of an eye, and a hand in the place of a hand, and a foot in the place of a foot, and a likeness in place of a likeness, then you will enter the kingdom."
Makes sense.
Yeah, I just feel like I just stuck a screwdriver straight into my brain and just started spinning it around.
So,
What in the
again,
Harry?
As above, what's...
Yep.
Yeah. The two becoming the one.
Male and female.
It's not like in this place of light that we came from, like...
When you make the two
Male and
one,
female is just part of this physical world.
he previously said the kingdom of God is inside and outside you. And here he says when you make the inside like the outside, and the outside like the inside, the above like the below, the above like the below, not make the below like the above.
So you're
Interesting.
bringing heaven down to earth. You're unleashing maybe the heaven, because he says that heaven is within you, I believe, talking about the soul. Your soul radiates into the world.
What is this male and female thing? When you make the male and the female one and the same, so that the male not be male, nor the female.
Recognizing your divine origin. I feel like I've said that about everything, but like...
Transgenders. One and the same.
Yeah, that's what he's saying.
To go on a rabbit trail off that, I feel like the Bible is very literal, more so than we ever imagined it would be to modern day.
I would agree.
Like, there's things that were always parables or stories or, like, revelations, meanings, like these big, overarching, sweeping stories that aren't exactly literal. Dog, I don't know. I'm taking things more and more literally as, like, these deceptions, the lies, false doctrines spreading around. Stuff like this, like male and female, the inside, the outside, it's like all these alternate view religions that nobody knows what to believe in anymore, it seems like, especially younger people. It all, like, it's just more and more this stuff makes sense, I guess. It's kind of like you read it open-mindedly and it's like, oh, that could apply to this. That could apply to this, but it also applied to these things in the past. But it's like it's very perfectly aligned with certain things today, too. Or maybe I'm crazy. I don't know. 23. Jesus said, "I shall choose you, 1 out of 1,000, and 2 out of 10,000, and they shall stand as a single one." The little flock, I suppose. Believers being the minority. 24. His disciples said to him, "Show us the place where you are, since it is necessary for us to seek it." He said to them, "Whoever has ears, let him hear. There is a light within a man of light, and he lights up the whole world. If he does not shine, he is darkness." Perhaps soul.
Making the inside or the outside like the inside.
And maybe some people don't have souls, and they are darkness.
I wonder what the, like, how do you do, like, it's talking, is it just the realization of what is within you that they're emphasizing on?
That's the unclear part.
Yeah. How do you make
how do you make the inside outside and the outside inside? And
is it just a realization that to me it seems like he's saying
when you realize everything is one, you'll have your power, basically.
Is this a moment of realization, or is it a progression? And at what point, if it's a progression, do you become righteous? A child of the light.
Personally, I think the author is putting a priority on enlightenment.
It seems that way.
Sudden realization.
25. Jesus said, "Love your brother like your soul. Guard him like the pupil of your eye." Fair enough. 26. Jesus said, "You will see the mote in your brother's eye, but you do not see the beam in your own eye. When you cast the beam out of your own eye, then you will see clearly to cast the mote from your brother's eye." And there we have another alignment with the other Gospels. 27, in brackets, as if added later, it says, Jesus said, okay, end brackets, "If you do not fast as regards to the world, you will not find the kingdom. If you do not observe the Sabbath as a Sabbath, you will not see the Father." I don't remember that one.
I've not observed the Sabbath as the Sabbath. That could be one reason why early church fathers left this out. I don't know if Gnostics put an emphasis on the Sabbath or not, but if we know anything about early church history, the Sabbath and its level of observance and the day that it was practiced on changed throughout history. Originally, we have like the seventh-day Jewish Sabbath. Jewish people would very strictly rest on the seventh day. If you live close to a synagogue, you'd go to the synagogue. In early Christian circles, I believe that they, even if they were Gentiles, they would find themselves, I don't know if they were resting, but they certainly would find themselves at a synagogue on the Sabbath, because of that's when the scriptures are being read. Not everybody could read back then. So if they were like a God-fear, if they were following God, they would probably going nonetheless to listen to this teaching on the Sabbath.
And the first part, if you do not fast as regards to the world, you will not find the kingdom.
Where just earlier he says, do not fast.
I
do not
know.
pray.
If you fast, you'll be condemned, I think is what it said.
But again, this is a different type of gospel, to where
Help.
any other one you'd be like, well, these have contradictions, to where like contradictions, since it's supposed to be a mystery.
Perhaps the original language has different words, but this is just a translation that might not make that much sense to us.
I did hear this in another translation. Any one of them I listened to during this week in preparation to the podcast.
I mean, like how you can go to
did say
Strong's Concordance, and for the Gospels, and you can find a little bit of additional meaning to certain specific words. Words that are the same, but you look up the original meaning, and it's like, oh, this could also mean this. I wonder if this is one of those situations where fasting, I don't know, fasting is kind of a specific thing, but maybe the translation is rough.
I think it is meant to confuse us.
Well, it's doing a good job of that. 28. Jesus said, "I took my place in the midst of the world, and I appeared to them in flesh. I found all of them intoxicated. I found none of them thirsty. And my soul became afflicted for the sons of men, because they are blind in their hearts and do not have sight. For empty they came into the world, and empty too they shall seek to leave the world. But for the moment they are intoxicated. When they shake off their wine, then they will repent." Simple explanation, I guess, is intoxicated in sin. You give up sin, give up the allure of it. You realize how far you've gone into sin, like when you're drunk and you sober up, you're like, holy crap, what did I do?
Or in Gnostic terms, an attachment to the physical world. You become drunk on the distractions of the physical realm, the material world.
29. Jesus said, "If the flesh came into being because of spirit, it is a wonder. But if spirit came into being because of the body, it is a wonder of wonders. Indeed, I am amazed at how this great wealth has made its home in this poverty.
The great wealth being
The spirit in the home
soul.
of the flesh.
Poverty being the flesh, yeah.
If flesh came into being because of spirit, it's a wonder. Okay, but if spirit came into being because of the body, it is a wonder of wonders.
So
Is that talking about birth? Like a conception?
I think he's talking about, I do think that's what he's talking about. Starting, your beginning, being in heaven, spirit giving birth to flesh, and then he's saying it's even more wonderful to return to that place of spirit. The flesh giving birth to spirit. What do you think about that?
I was also thinking that as well. Here we got a good one. Ready for this? 30. Jesus said, where there are 3 gods, they are gods. Little g's on both. When there are 2 or 1, I am with him. Are these talking about, like, one verse is about gods and then the other one is like where our canonical Bible says there are 2 or more gathered in my name, there I am with them?
It seems like that is some sort of take on that idea.
Because that's strange that they're both right there by each other.
Totally different than, like, it's referring to multiple gods.
Where there are 3 gods, they are gods.
Which,
little g, little g.
From what we said earlier in the episode, it was like Gnostics did have views on multiple gods. So he very well literally could be saying that. 31.
Jesus said, no prophet is accepted in his own village. No physician heals those who know him. The first half of that, obviously, is in our Gospels. The Son of Man has nowhere to lay his head. He's rejected in Nazareth, right?
Yep.
No physician heals those who know him. Why, if he fails, then everybody's mad at him? Why is this?
It could be a reference to where he said no prophet is accepted in his home. In the
just continuing the thought.
Mm-hmm.
Just that people that know him aren't going to support him. 32. Jesus said, a city being built on a high mountain and fortified cannot fall, nor can it be hidden. Okay, straightforward. 33. Jesus said, preach from your housetops that which you will hear in your ear. For no one lights a lamp and puts it under a bushel, nor does he put it in a hidden place, but rather he sets it on a lampstand so that everyone who enters and leaves will see its light. That's actually the verse in the canon I thought of on the previous one, but they basically say the same thing, both in alignment with our Gospels. 34. Jesus said, if a blind man leads a blind man, they will both fall into a pit. Is that in Proverbs or the Gospels? I forget. That is in our Bible now, though.
I know, I think you're right. I think Jesus did say that.
Should we make this a 2-parter and cut it here? We're about an hour and a half.
I was thinking so, because where are we at in time?
Hour and a half.
Yeah, this is going to be one of our longest episodes. It's definitely one that I've enjoyed the most.
This is really fun. I agree. And we'll continue this on the next episode.
All right,
so
folks.
That was fun and informative.
Yeah, thank you for sitting with us and
listening to a couple of rednecks go on about stuff that's a little over their own heads.
Yes.
All right, until next time.
Stay curious.
And stay safe.
And stay strange.
Don't do anything we wouldn't do.
And maybe don't do some things we would do.
This is true. Like the bonfire. Remember the bonfire at Zach's?
Oh, I'd do that all over again.
All of it? I knew you were gay. No, I knew it.
I didn't know what you were talking about. Never mind. No, not that.
I knew it, bro. All right.
I thought you were talking about the time we jumped over the fire. Burn our legs up.
Oh, we had a lot of weird bonfire stuff, man. Burn our legs. Remember when we tried to start the one with the gasoline?
Which one?
Affair.
Oh, we were burning like...
we were going to do a mattress.
Yeah.
And we soaked it in gas. We were like, this will explode if we light it. So let's get a long roll of toilet paper and unroll it and use it as like a wick, right? Yeah, we soaked it in gas.
That was your idea.
Like 100 feet away from this freaking pile of stuff we wanted to burn. I flicked the lighter, dude. Just like every other video of idiots getting burned almost to death. That's how it went. I was in the middle of this giant plume of flames that shot out. And to make it worse, I started running away from the middle of it immediately. At about the same speed that this fire was like expanding. So I was right there.
Your arm was on fire, right?
No, my leg. And it burned all my leg hairs and it smelled nasty for like days.
You were like, my Uncle Monty would be so disappointed in me.
Dude, for real. We started trying to light an arrow on fire and shoot an arrow onto it. But every time we shot it, the fire would go out.
Yes. Makes sense.
Or the thing that we wrapped on it to burn would just fall off. The arrow would shoot right through it and it'd fall down.
I'm pretty sure fiery arrows being shot are usually doused in like some serious like oil, maybe.
We're going to have to actually make that work someday.
Yes.
Whose bow did we have? Was that yours?
It was mine, yeah.
Yeah, we definitely got to have some new bonfires. You have a truck still, so remember how we used to go behind Walmart and there's always some homeless guy's mattress there?
Is that where you got those mattresses?
I mean...
You also would get these random TVs from just wherever. And
dude,
you'd put like
there are so many TVs people threw out.
You'd put this junk TV in the back of somebody's truck, and then till they could find a place to get rid of the TV, they'd be stuck with this TV unless they decide to, litter.
What was epic was literally every one of my friends had a pickup truck without a cap. So I would find these TVs all over the place, like just outside of some business or some house, there's some junk TV sitting by the road. Like, that one, it's perfect.
Yeah, Jonathan was a prankster back in the day. One day, him and our friend Brittany, they like covered my dad's side mirror with duct tape. And then my dad, to get back at them, he put open cans of sardines underneath both their truck seats.
That was your dad?
It was my dad.
I never found out who that was.
Oh, you didn't know that?
No. Dude, I thought it was Jeremiah or you.
Nope, that was my dad.
Dude, because we both, like, he put one under Brittany's truck too, right? Yes. Dude, because she thought it was me. And when she told me, I was like, no. Dude, I had one of those freaking things under my seat too. Like, I don't know who did it.
It was a mystery.
No way that was your dad. Dude, I'm going to have to get him back for getting me back.
Well, it's certainly true that secrets have been revealed this episode.
That was literally like 8 years ago.
Oh, it was longer than that, dog.
I've not known who did that this whole time. That was your dad, dude? I never would expect that from him. We have to plot revenge. That's the only logical solution here.
Just do the exact same thing he did. Just do the exact same thing he did.
No, he'd know it's me.
What?
He'd know it's me.
No. Well, but maybe by the time he realized what that smell was, he'd pull the can out and be like, I have reaped what I have sown.
I'll release a whole herd of rabbits in his garden.
He doesn't have a fenced-in garden.
Dang it.
They'd just be running around the farm. Yeah, I'm free.
So you still have those hound dogs?
Oh, yeah, they got a couple hound dogs.
Well, I can't speculate too much on this podcast, but hey, that was fun. That was a fun rabbit trail right there. We got so many stories, dude. We got to tell some of these.
We've discussed early church history. We've discussed Gnostic belief system. We've discussed the Gospel of Thomas. We've discussed bonfire stories and the secrets behind old-time pranks.
A decade, a mystery in the waiting of the revelation.
Been revealed.
Oh my gosh. All right.
Long story short, don't try to prank an old man.
And if you do, be ready to get revenge on his revenge.
Yes. 10 years later.
We'll keep you updated. All right. Till next time.
We'll tell. This is how we'll know if he listens to this or not.
All right. Let's wrap it up.
All right, everybody. Thanks for hanging with us, and we'll see you next time. Till then, peace.
Toodles.
If you would like to contact us, email us at peaceandtoodles@gmail.com. salutations, my fellow strangers.
What will they think of next?